Hey everybody, Chris Vaccaro here for another Sachem conversation. This time with Dom Savino, spent many years coaching and teaching in Sachem. How's it going, Coach?
It's going great. Retirement is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. Listen. I was thinking this week. I've been talking to you for over 20 years. I mean, I remember sitting in the coach's office, in the phys ed office as a student in the high school. I did play by play for every basketball game my junior and senior year that you coached. And so
Wow.
I'm thinking a lot of the coaches, the Pizarros, the Mahoneys, the Schmidts, our relationship goes back over 2 decades, and we're still talking about trying to keep these things alive, trying to make sure that we bridge this gap so people remember Sachem and what it was, so we can figure out how to make what it's supposed to be going forward.
Yeah, well, you talk to those guys for 20 years, and when we get together, we talk about it since we started, which was back in the early 70s. So, and we talk about all the great people that came through that we were fortunate enough to coach. And the most amazing thing, really, of all of this is uh, how successful all these people became. It's just amazing. I mean, even our last Hall of Fame induction, the amount of people and what they accomplished is just like you just shake your head sometimes and go, "Oh my goodness, how did that happen?"
Yeah,
you know,
it's funny you mention it like that because I do the same thing, and I'm the one gathering all the information first. And every year I'm like, oh man, is this too many people for this Hall of Fame class? And then I do the bios, and then I get really formal with sort of classifying where they all rank. And then I find themes. This person, most of the theme for the class of 22 was 3 sport athlete, 3 sport captain, 3 sport all county, 3 sport champions at some level. And that's just at Sachem. Then
hmm
you look at almost every single person that we honor in the Hall of Fame were really good in college. And half of those people went on to coach somewhere else or, had some sort of club team that they were responsible for. Or a couple of guys spent their entire lives, at the races, the endurance races across the world. Some of this stuff, I'm like, wow.
yeah,
And so there's just a lot of great people that went here, and that's the bottom line.
and that's what we talk about all the time. Whenever the Hall of Fame comes up, and some people ask me about that, I go, "Do you know how many people who are absolutely unbelievably deserving to be in the Hall that you guys haven't been able to get to yet because you can't put in 100 people at a time? It's got to be sprinkled in like you're doing, and you're doing a great job. I mean, um, I had one guy come up to me and go, it's just I forgot how important it is to reconnect with everybody and how much fun it is to be around these people again and to just to rehash old times and what's going on. So no, it's fantastic. I think anybody who comes and anybody who is a part of it is just blown away by the whole thing. It's amazing. It really is. Credit to you.
Thank you, thank you. The it is a two-pronged satisfaction for me. And you mentioned something that's really important. Yes, obviously primary honor people who deserve it because they left it all out there because they represented us proudly. In the case of coaches, they impacted thousands, tens of thousands of lives, students and such. But the reunion like feel of getting, in this case there was 200, 300 people who you
Yeah.
may never get to see again, or you
hmm
haven't seen in 30 or 40 years. And I watched that from afar, and I'm going, look what we did for these people. Look at this connection that they'll forever have. And listen, social media and camera phones, all that didn't exist when everyone was in their prime, in their heyday. The fact that they could all come back and take a picture in front of the wall or in
Yeah.
the gym, that little piece of memento that you can look at for the rest of your life, I think that means something.
Without a doubt, it means a tremendous amount, and not only are most of the people there being able to come back, but you also get to share it with your family, and I think that's really a huge factor. Also, you have your kids come in and you go, well, yeah, that's my picture, and they look at you, like, wow, what, I know you accomplished a lot, but oh my goodness, I didn't realize this is what you did. So, I think that's just as important as what you just said also.
And the primary sort of underscored value of all this for me is to make sure we bridge that gap, historically speaking. That's the purpose of this conversation and the whole Sachem Conversation project. It's an oral history project delivered by the people who lived the history and made the history and impacted lots and lots of people in this community, like yourself. And I will put these interviews both digitally and then a transcription in a physical form in the Sachem Public Library at the end of each year, in the libraries at Sachem East and Sachem North. Plus, they're available on the Alumni Association site, the Sachem Report site, and 3 or 4 different social platforms, including YouTube, to have a digital archive.
Okay.
I feel really strongly about people understanding where they come from. For me, it's not just about living in the community. I really want, and obviously I am, but I want other people to be a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
I want other people to understand why you live here. And I want the kids really first and foremost, when they walk through those hallways and see all that stuff that we're putting on the walls, to go, I want to do that. I want to be great. The digitally savvy community members and kids can find this stuff just with, a click of a computer screen, a click of a phone. So this is important for me to make sure we don't forget who we are. Oh,
without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, the history is so rich and it's so full. I mean, and it's an amazing thing. And like I said, when we get together, we always talk about the war stories, games and stuff like that. But mostly we talk about the contributions of the guys who played for us, and how amazing, some of the people were, and how amazing, their lives, turned out to be. It's just incredible when you, and then when you sit there and listen to, we talked about, the fact that you said is that, the accomplishments after school on this last group was ridiculous. I mean, I could not believe some of these people,
Yeah.
And then, the other thing that's really wonderful for a coach, a lot of times when you coach or you teach, you don't get that feedback. Like if you do a job, you finish a job, you go look at it and you go, oh, wow, look at the job I did, but you go to this event and sometimes a former player or a former student will walk up to you and tell you, Coach, do you know how much you influenced me? And you look at the guy and you go, no, I have no idea, and then he tells you something and you're just blown away. It's like, oh my God, so, but it's all been great. It's all been great. And then, to be, when I started out, I wanted to coach. That really was my thing. And I wanted to be, I wanted to teach. I originally started out to be a math social studies teacher in college. And that lasted one semester. And my 2 roommates were phys ed majors. So I said, yeah, I think I want to do that. I think that would be a lot of fun. So I ended up becoming a phys ed major. And, the rest is history. Applied and got the job at Sachem.
What about before that? What about, high school and basketball interests as a kid, people who impacted you to, be close to the game?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Bayport. I literally, we grew up in the Bronx. And then when I was 6 or 7, my parents moved out to Bayport. So I grew up in Bayport, and in Bayport, I played basketball, I played football, and I ran track. And at the time, I just knew I wanted to be in athletics. The first person that really influenced me was my uncle, he was a Marine. And when he came out of the Marines, he moved in with us in Bayport. And he was a huge softball, baseball player. And he loved the New York Giants. So every Sunday he would climb up on the roof and change the antenna so he could get the Giant game from Connecticut, because that's the only way you could watch the Giants back then. So I started to develop a love for the sport. And but one day I went down the street and some guy was shooting baskets. I really didn't know what basketball was at the time. And gave me a couple pointers, and I fell in love with that sport. So, when I got out of high school, I knew I wanted to go into education because I wanted to, I enjoyed the fact that you could influence kids, and you could, be some part of a factor in their lives. And then when I got to college, like I said, I first started to be a history social studies teacher, a math social studies teacher, because I really enjoyed those 2 subjects. And then while I was there, I just said, I think I'll be a phys ed teacher. And with that, I came. I was gonna true story. I was gonna try to play football, and my college roommate and I go out, and we start having a catch. Well, he was the quarterback, and he became the quarterback, and he started throwing balls, and I was running all over the place, just about catching them. So I said, well, maybe I shouldn't be a football player. Maybe I'll just go try and play basketball. Well, it turns out my college roommate became very successful in football. He was in the NFL for 25 years, and he and I had a lot of great conversations in college about coaching, about kids, about this, about that. So I ended up going out, and I made the freshman basketball team, and I had a coach. His name was Al Proto. I still see him to this day, and he had a tremendous influence on me. Going back to high school, I had another, my JV basketball coach really had an influence on me. His name was Joe Costello, and he just taught me, both of these men just taught me hard work, commitment, and just giving it up for the team really was what counted. And I kind of took that with me throughout my entire coaching career, was that, it's great. Everybody talks about wins and losses, but what it really came down to for me was if I could get these guys to care about each other more than they cared about themselves, that to me was a victory. And that's really became my coaching philosophy, especially probably a third of the way in. I just realized, it's about creating a team. It's about having these guys work together and sacrificing for each other and trying to put your goals to the side. And fortunately, I was able to have 5 or 6 teams in all the years that I coached that literally exemplified that statement. And obviously, those teams are outrageously successful, So, but yeah, those were the 2 guys that really influenced the way I coached. And and then when I got to Southern, I went to Southern Connecticut and New Haven, Connecticut, and played for Coach Proto. He was like Coach Costello, and I just said, yeah, this is really kind of how I want to coach. They were hard, they were demanding, but they were fair. And they'd walk over and put their arm around you and talk to you and just uplift you after. Back then, basically they tore you down and then they built you back up. So that was the norm for coaching back then.
Yeah, that was the standard. That's generational. You do that now, you're out of a job
in 2 minutes.
Yeah,
you might not make 2 minutes.
Right.
But I'm sorry. So going forward with that, I went to Southern, and I didn't make the varsity back then. Remember, freshmen couldn't play on the varsity. There was a freshman team and then a varsity team, so we couldn't play there. And in fairness to everybody, the coaches called me in and they told me what I had to do. So I said, not a problem. But when I went home, back to Bayport, my dad owned a business. And he said, that's wonderful, but you got to go to work in the morning. So I went to work every morning. I was tired when I got home. And so I really didn't put a whole lot of time into working on my game, even though I would play every night. But it's not the same as making a commitment to playing and putting time in. So when I went back, I didn't make the team. But they kept me involved, and I was always involved with the team. So I would travel with them. And, I wasn't the manager. I was like a statistician or something like that. So they always kept me involved in the game. And, I really developed even more of a love. Then when I got out of college, obviously like everybody else back then, there weren't a whole lot of jobs when I got out of college. It was like the lull in the employment. And then lo and behold, one day in August, late August, I got a call, and it was Sachem, and they wanted me to come in for an interview. And I got the job. And I started in September of 1972. And the first person I met was Dennis James. Dennis James and I were health teachers together. And Dennis was the soccer guy. And they asked me what I did. I said, well, I can coach I played football, I played basketball, I ran track. So that instantly made me, they wanted me to be. As a matter of fact, I first started teaching. I was a health teacher for 1 year. And then after that, Tom Savino became the AD, and then I took his slot at Samoset. But that first year, actually, Tommy was half and I was half the second year. That first year, I volunteered with Bill Payne as the 7th and 8th grade football coach at Samoset. Then I was a volunteer, not with Tommy, but I volunteered with Carl Cabasa.
Wow.
He was the basketball coach when I first started. And then Tommy was the track coach, and I volunteered with him. And then after a couple years, Bill went into administration, so they asked me to be the coach, and I took over the 7th and 8th grade job. And then Tommy went into administration, and that's when they created the two teams. They created a 7th and 8th grade team, and they created a 9th grade team. And I was the 7th and 8th grade coach, and Jerry Hirsch became the 9th grade coach. And then in track, Jerry Hirsch and I we were co-coaches. So as time went on, I started to have a family, and I said, "Wow, coaching every month is getting to be a lot." So I gave up the track, and I ended up being coaching football for Fred, and I coached basketball in Timmy's program until I don't know, just after this we split, in Samoset. It was because I stopped coaching football. I went to see Fred. What happened was every year I would go to basketball camp. It was called, at that time, it was called Green Lane, but it was really Rolling Massimino's basketball camp. And I would come out and I would just be doing basketball for a week with all these, all this stuff. And then I'd come out and I'd be coaching football. It just got to be like, I got to make a decision here. So I just said, all right, I went to see Fred, and I said, that's right. We went to the 9th grade, and the 9th graders played on Saturday. Okay. 7th and 8th grade played on Friday night. So the 9th graders played on Saturday. So I said, okay, Fred, listen, send me down to Sagamore, Seneca. I'll coach down there, but I can't do Saturday, 6 days a week and then go into basketball season. So Fred asked me to stay one more year coaching the 9th grade team. And I told him I would. And then they hired Dave Lowley. And then Dave Lowley became the football coach at South. And then I just I went into basketball. And then I coached JV basketball with Steve Rich for, I don't know how long. I mean, I was a junior high. And then I was a JV coach. And then I became Steve's assistant, I guess, I don't know, maybe 15 years, I guess. I don't know how long it was. And then I got an opportunity. I got a telephone. Actually, Steve went to a coaches meeting, an executive board coaches meeting. And Don Perry from Santa Maricias asked Steve if he could talk to me. And Steve said, sure. So Steve came in the office and said, hey, Don Perry wants to talk to you about a job at Santa Maricias. And I said, really? I had no plans on leaving. I mean, I didn't want to go anywhere. I really wanted to stay. I really enjoyed myself. And so what happened was I went out to Center, and when they were driving me around the town, I couldn't believe how much basketball was important in that community. So I just said, okay, I'll take the job. So I ended up there, and then I stayed there for 9 years, and then I left. I had never seen my son really play the game of basketball, and I just said, you know what? I didn't have kids, so I can watch a videotape of him playing. So I quit, and I watched him for 2 years. And then after those 2 years, Steve retired, and everybody wanted to know what I was doing, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I really wasn't committed one way or the other. And at the last second, I just said, I'll throw my name into the hat, and then the rest is history. So I came back, thank heavens.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning. So 1972,
yeah.
Were you interviewing with Dave Rothenberg? Did he explain, what this thing was going to be? Because Sachem was starting to formalize, and 3 to 5 years later, There was 20,000 students enrolled in the district, and the thing blew up. Did you have any sense of that?
We had a sense that it was going to get bigger, because every class just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I really never. I talked to Dave only once, and that was when they were going to hire me to be the head guy for football. But Dave and I never really had great conversation. Dave was a different type of guy, man. He was always talking. He had a lot to do with the state, and he had a lot to do with, believe it or not, what happened at Sachem. And whatever anybody says, Dave hired great people.
Totally.
Great people. For whatever, you can say what you want, but I mean, just think of the people that man hired, and the influence that they had on the school district, and the coaches the coaches that worked at Sachem, there were other districts that had a coach or two coaches like Sachem, but nobody had the number of coaches that were so dedicated. I mean, it was, you just couldn't believe, how many guys were like, and you couldn't help but learn. I mean, there was no way you could help but learn from each guy. I mean, Fred was really the guy that most of us looked to, and I think other than him Fred being Fred, the fact that he was a college coach and he had that presence about himself, and, a lot of us would talk. Yeah, I would always talk to Fred. I mean, always talk to Fred. We would sit for an hour and talk, I mean, I talked to all the coaches. It wouldn't be unusual for me to go down to see Frank Schmidt and sit down, and him and I sit on hall duty and talk strategy about soccer and basketball and how the two interrelate, because I always felt that, soccer was a great sport for basketball, because the passing in soccer is, that's what the whole sport's about, and if you could get the kids in basketball to be able to pass like soccer kids, think of how much better your team was. And with Fred, I would sit with him and we would talk about personnel, how to treat people, how to coach. But I also talked to Fred because I always felt this. I always felt that football coaches, I still do to this day, do the best job I've ever seen of anybody breaking down film. I mean, no one breaks down film like a football coach. So I would sit with him and ask him what he would look for, and we would talk about, how to break down. And then I would always tell him, football coaches are the best at breaking down film. I said, but basketball coaches are the best of game management at the end of a game. So we would share ideas back and forth all the time that way. And then I would sit with Rick Mercurio a lot, and not so much Blaney, because Blaney was in a different school, so he kept popping up. But Rick seemed to be Rick was there a long time, and we would sit down and talk about basketball and lacrosse are very similar sports in the way they run plays. So I know that lacrosse has 6 people, but in basketball, obviously 5. But yeah, we would talk about how we would run different plays and different philosophies and different concepts. So we talked a lot about that, and with Bates, I would always ask him about, for me, and we taught a lot of end of game situations. And with Bates, I would always ask him about baseball and the fact that, all baseball is situations. This guy's up the count, this guy's on first, second, we talked a lot about how we developed and how we taught situations in baseball. So I would go to all these guys and they would come to me too. And everybody would just share ideas. And that's how you learn. I mean, really, that's really how you learn. And then, going back to in the early 70s, I was just a young guy and I was just happy to be teaching and happy to be coaching. And we had such tremendous, listen, Chris, we had such tremendous talent that, you didn't have to be that good of a coach. The talent just took over and you were successful. And as long as you steered them in the right way, you're going to have a successful year. So the football, I know the football, I know you love football. So this is a great football story. Remember we had the black and the gold, the two ninth grade football teams. I tell this to Fred all the time. He loves this story. Well, I'm coaching the one ninth grade team, and Frank Louise is coaching the other ninth grade team. And we used to play back-to-back in the mornings, and we beat up on the football field. Well, this one particular game, I think we were playing East Islip. One of us were playing East Islip. I don't remember if we played first and Frank played second. But whatever it was, we put both teams on the field to warm up at the same time for the second game. Now, it's a sight that I will never forget as long as I live. There were 100 kids. They were 10 rows wide and 10 people deep, all spaced out. And they were doing the cows for a pregame warm-up. And I'll never forget it. I don't know who was the coach. It was the varsity coach had come because the junior high guy. He walked on the field. He goes, "That's it. We're never playing you guys ever again." It was unbelievable show. It was incredible. That's kind of when I knew, like, okay, this is legit. This is real. No one can defeat this. It's impossible. It was just impossible, And
is this like early 80s late 70s, early 80s when Sachem was pretty much unbeatable?
Yeah, it was. And I mean, it's the who's who. I mean, coaching football back then, it was like the who's who's. Coaching basketball back then in the junior highs, it was like, our competition back then was Brentwood and Huntington. Those two schools, those are really, really good schools, and obviously Brentwood and Sachem always were competing against each other in basketball for all these years. But but back then, you could just see the numbers and the other thing that, no one ever talks about, the quality of the kids it was incredible, their character, their makeup. And it wasn't just the athletes. I loved teaching and coaching in Sachem. It was a blue collar town, and it didn't matter. Kids just respected you. It was like, okay, you said stop. All right, I'll stop. Stuff like that. Or you said do this. Okay, I'll do that. It was
a different era, but
yeah.
even the community itself was finding itself at that point. It had found an identity, and it's okay to be a tough, hard-nosed, middle-class community that has to work hard for what you get. And you just touched on, it's not always just the athletes. I have studied and researched and developed the biggest alumni list, perhaps, of any school district in the state. Ours is tremendous. And that period of time from like 75 to 85, maybe 75 to 95, whatever. I mean, you could stretch it. It's some of the most influential people in the country. The head of NASDAQ, big-time doctors trying to cure cancer, professional athletes in the NBA, the NFL. I mean, I can keep going. There was something in the water here that just made this place very different at that time.
You know what? It was the overall attitude of the people. They knew that, first of all, I always felt that the size of Sachem was not a deterrent, as most people did. I always believed that because of the size, kids had to figure out really fast in their career, in their life, what they were going to and wanted to do. And I felt that because of that, they worked really hard to get where they were. And because they had to work so hard and they had to compete, that they were always trying to get it, for whatever you want to say, an edge in life. And I think that fact that they had to compete every day, you didn't have to compete on a field of sports, but just in the classroom and just to be recognized, that's always what I thought was the greatest thing that Sachem presented to people. It wasn't the size. It was the fact that if you didn't compete every day, you're going to get swallowed up. And not too many kids got swallowed up. Most of the kids fought and they got to where they did. And, I mean, not only alumni like you said, believe it or not, I meet alumnus from Sachem all the time, successful electricians, plumbers, carpenters. I mean, guys that you're like, wow, what a fantastic thing. I mean, it's not just, like we talk about, like we always see, but these people are super successful in their lives. So Yeah.
So go back to the your journey. You go to Santa Mauritius. That they do even to this day they have a good basketball program, and you could talk about that. But the one thing that I just learned about when I had talked to Risa Zander was
Yeah.
that she coached with you, the legendary Risa Zander, who
Yeah.
was a pioneer for female athletics and basketball at Sachem. She eventually, migrated to coach with you on the boys' side at Santa Mauritius, and I find that amazing. And so you had a close to this day have a close relationship with Risa. Talk about that coaching with her.
it was good. She had just had some tough time with coaching, and she was looking. I said, "Why don't you just come and coach with me?" She goes, "Are you serious? We have been friends since 1972." And we did a lot together as socially. My wife and Risa are really good, close friends, and we had some other friends. But from basketball standpoint, she and I used to bounce ideas off each other constantly, and so when that happened, I said, "Hey, Reese," I said, "This never happened before. Why don't you come coach with me?" I said, "We'll have a blast. You have your mind." I said, "You come and go, do what you want." I think the guys would enjoy it and everything. So at that time, I was like, I don't know how many years into at center. Anyways, we had a really good team, and she came in, and the guys kind of looked at her like, "Who is this person?" And I said, "Hey," I introduced her. I told them what he was, But again, everything was they were skeptical until the first time she said something, and they all looked at her, and then they looked at me, and then that was it. She just proved to them that she knew what she was talking about. She understood the game, and she brought a different aspect to coaching, because obviously the difference in a male and a female, and her attitude versus what she saw, and what my attitude and how I approached the game. So the kids really enjoyed her. There was one game, there was one point she couldn't make a game. She had to do something with her mom, and the kids were really, well, where is she? Like, why isn't she here? And I said she had to take care of some family business, and they were like, "Yeah, that ain't right." So, but they really enjoyed it, and we had a good time. It was really fun for me too, because I was able to have somebody who understood the game really, really well, and was able to bounce ideas off of her, and more important, get feedback. I mean, because it's very difficult as a coach to get feedback from people. People don't want to say anything to you. They'll come to your practice and they'll go, "Oh, that was a great job. I really like this. I really like that." No, 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 no. What do you see that I can improve on? That's what I wanted to have people tell me. And she was able to do that. Because of our relationship. Plus, we were together all the time, and she was able to say, "I really like this, but have you thought about trying it that way?" It's just a different idea, because she had been her own person, and she had been obviously ridiculously successful. So it really was great, and it really was a lot of fun. And you know what? Quite honestly, neither one of us thought about a male female coaching together. It was just like, okay, we're coaching together. It wasn't like a mind-blowing thing to me, at least to me. Anyway.
Well, you had been familiar with her and speaking basketball with her for many, many years at that point, so it was second nature. And honestly, she established herself already as one of the top coaches in the county. So yeah, for the average boy basketball player on the team, they may not realize or understand, but she's got a great basketball mind, and she's rallied, arguably the greatest era in girls basketball history in Sachem. There's people in the 90s might be offended by that, but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. Listen, when she took over that program, there wasn't much of a program. Let me put it to you that way. Okay. Right. It wasn't like, don't forget, Title IX had just come in. So they were just starting that portion of the program, and all the women's sports. There wasn't a great deal of successful women's sports prior to that period where Risa came in and some of the other women started to coach. I mean, but for her to take it where it went to, and then hand it off, and then have it continue to where it went to is also a tremendous thing because, it's the feeder programs that are the key to everything. I've always believed that it's the feeder programs, and the bigger the feeder program that you do, as long as you maintain that feeder program, you should be successful. And that was another one of my big things. When I took over, SIAG was decent, but it wasn't great. When I left, there was I think we had 1,700 kids involved in SIAG. When people would say to me, well, why would you want that many? I said, well, why wouldn't you not? We had developed, and I have to give a shout out to Jim Candemaris and Jimmy Doherty and Tony Caggiano. Those guys helped along the way too. They were instrumental. And Tony Falco. You don't get to be successful as we were without people in the community being involved. And, their heart has to be in the right place. Yeah, it can't be about individuals looking for themselves. It has to be someone like yourself, someone who cares deeply about the community, who's willing to put the work in, because really, you're not getting any credit for anything outside of the people that you're working with. But I had those guys, and we built it up to, there was 1,700 kids, and we created SIAG was for everybody. And if you wanted to be more involved, then we had, the travel team. And then if you wanted to be even more involved in that, they put together an AAU team. So, we kind of had that thing going. And people would say, well, what about all the kids that don't make it? I said, well, hopefully, one, they have got an appreciation of love for the game. And number two, Chris, let's say I didn't make it, you made it. Well, you're my friend. I'm going to go support you when you're playing. So I'm going to go to the games. That's how it works. It's not, Chris made it, but no one's going to say, no, he's my friend. We played together. I really enjoy watching him, and I'm going to support him. So that's what the whole thing was about. And that's why I really believed in the SIAG and all the community things that we could do. And fortunately, I had really good people who helped me out and really worked with us. Candemaris and Tony and Jimmy. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but they were just unbelievable hard workers. And, it took a lot of work to organize 1,700 kids. People look at you and I go, well, yeah, we used every gym. And then then you were always fighting for gym space. But it was all good. It was all good. But I really believe, and I always felt sorry for Bates because they had the Little League program, and you had the two factions in Sachem. You had the Sachem Little League, and then what was the one up in the corner? I don't even remember.
CYO, St. Joseph's.
Yeah. So, but you just look at him. I said, well, look at baseball. Look at the infrastructure. And then you look at Fred with all the stuff that he had going on, and Jack with his wrestling program. And the soccer teams. You can't go drive on Long Island Expressway without seeing Sachem soccer fields.
That was the biggest, I think. Football is so niche focused, but something was built. It was just tough because there's a limited. Once you get into the tackle program, it's limited. But with soccer, the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands actually kids played on that field right off of Waverly Avenue, which I'm driving by actually this week, and they're starting to put up a whole housing complex back there, and you could see it from the expressway, and it just caught me off guard. Things are changing, but keep that field. I hope they never remove that field because that is very important.
Absolutely.
Joe Scally playing on the World Cup roster played on that field. That's more than enough reason to never touch our youth fields. But yeah, every successful program Sachem has had, there's a foundation in the youth experience, which is always a community-driven endeavor, which I obviously greatly respect. So going back to your journey, you come back to Sachem, you make that decision. You get to be a head coach in the Sachem basketball program. There was Tim Klauser and Steve Rich and that county championship team in 95, 96. There's an inherent respect for the program for you working in that building, being able to just walk right out of the coach's office and get to work and coach. Very cool experience for you to do all of that.
It was outstanding. Listen, I loved every second of it. For me, it was wonderful. It was, being able to be in the building with the kids, seeing them all day, because there's a lot of things that go on during a day that you're into relationship with your players that you don't when you're in the building and you're able to see these guys all the time. Sometimes they're going to avoid you and sometimes they're not, but you get to see these guys. And hey, that was a great team. And you develop a different relationship rather than just walking in and spending 10, 15 minutes with them and then moving on. So, but yeah, you know what? We had great kids, great players, and super. That's
There's
great.
something I always notice about, and maybe it's because there's, whereas football, there's been like literally 3 coaches in the last 50 something years, that
Yep.
we knew everybody, and it's a limited amount of Italian American, and 2 of the 3 being Sachem alums. Like football, it's easier to track because there's a handful of guys in basketball. You, Atkinson, you have the Brissons of the world, the Fintas, the Steve Rich, the Klauser, even the modern Tom Malee, Candamaris, the younger Candamaris in recent years. There's this very cool mutual inherent respect amongst Sachem basketball coaches, and I can't define it other than fraternity and brotherhood. And you all are very different, sort of generations, but I see each other at games. I see each other going to other basketball games, going to college things. It's just very cool to see, and I don't know if I see that in any other sport. You know what I'm talking about? Can you describe that relationship you guys all have?
Well,
and even like Bob LaCourt and
yes, here's kind of what happened. So when Steve was the head coach and I was his assistant, Mike had come in, John Finta had come in. We used to have lunch together. Our lunch periods were together. So we used to sit remember the basketball office, which was underneath the basket?
Sure, yeah.
We would sit there and talk basketball and philosophies and watch tape and break down games and just talk about the game of basketball every lunch period all year long. So we kind of developed that camaraderie and that feeling, like you said, of, we were all in it together. We were all sharing ideas. We all talked, and sometimes we had heated discussions about how to do certain things or how we wanted to play certain things, but we were always exchanging ideas. And it was really just building on that and, developing that friendship and that camaraderie and that love of really it's the love of the game. That's really what it's about. I mean, to this day, I went out to dinner with John and his wife, my wife and myself, and we weren't sitting down 2 minutes when John and I were Xing and Oing on the tablecloth. So, so that's really, it happened that way. And then what happens is when you have that, people get sucked into that. Like, if you have any interest at all and you're walking in and there's 4 guys discussing, how to defend a pick and roll, or, 4 guys watching the tape and sitting down and saying, well, this guy did this and that. I like to do this. I like to do that. Or, hey, here's a play. I saw this on TV yesterday. People just get sucked into that because no one's hiding things and sharing things. And to be honest, Chris, I'll tell you, the greatest influence I have ever had as a coach was my relationship with Coach Rolly Massimino. When Timmy Klauser brought me to the camp. It was in Green Lane, but it really was the Villanova basketball camp. And in the second year we were there, Coach Mass invited me and probably my best friend, one of my best friends, Ken Gableman, to practice. And when we went, he just took a liking to us, and he included us on every single thing that he did. I mean, we would sit in on practices and be able to have input to breaking down games, to going to recruit. I mean, it was amazing. But the thing that I'm talking about is we would stay in a camp and all the coaches stayed in a dormitory. Okay. And that's where the coaches stayed. The kids all were in cabins all over this camp. It was out up in the mountains. There wasn't at nighttime or in the morning or at lunchtime, because you get a break. If there was 20 coaches, there was 2 or 3 coaches clinics going on in this dormitory. People shared ideas. I mean, and that's where I learned a lot of stuff about end of game and the philosophy of end of games. I mean, guys would say, well, this is how I run the end of game. This is my philosophy. And then Coach Mass would walk in, and then everything would stop, and he would just take over the conversation, And then this is a true story. I mean, I know I'm rambling on a little bit. I come out of go down to the main court where everybody's going, and I walk down the hill, and I see 2 people sitting there, and one guy's got the old magnetic board with all the pieces, and the other guy's just listening. And I walk down the bottom of the hill, I turn my head. It's Hubie Brown. I'm sitting with Hubie Brown and this other coach, and he's teaching us how to run the fast break. I mean, that's just impossible, to have that kind of an experience. But I learned a lot there. And then when we came back, we all shared everything we had with all the coaches. I mean, what did I care if I had an offense and Mike Atkinson needed it to break a press? So I said, hey, Mike, try this. Or he'd say, hey, Dom, this is a pretty good idea. Why don't you do that? And then Steve and I would always, Steve and I we commuted together to work, because he lived in Miller Place with me every day for 20 years. So, I mean, it's a lot of time to be in a car and all you're doing is you're talking basketball.
So, people may not see it like I do, and then hear the lunches, the dinners, the commutes, it all adds up. And it's just it's a relationship and a friendship built on the court. And that's pretty cool. Yeah. And so the end of your career is a college coaching experience. You get to go to be the head coach at Adelphi and do some really cool things. Was that ever a goal? Talk about that experience. How different was that? You have to be a recruiter. You're still not far from home, which is very unique. But how did that all come about? And we'll wrap on that.
Okay. Yes, I always wanted to be a college coach. I had I probably had in the course of my career at least 3 or 4 offers to go to college. And each time it got harder and harder to say no. But each time what it really came down to was my family. Coach Mass asked me to come to Villanova, and I said, I thought about it, and I just said to my wife, I said, I can't go to Villanova. I'll be laying on a beach in Hawaii, and you'll be stuck in some apartment in Philadelphia. I said, I can't do that. Plus, I would have had to take. I mean, I wasn't making much money then, but when they wanted to pay me, it was like ridiculous. So I never went. And then but I always wanted to be a college coach. Always wanted to be. Everybody knew that I wanted to be a college coach. And so when I retired from teaching, one of my close friends in high school who lived 3 houses down from me was the head coach at Dowling College. And he asked me if I wanted to go to see some kids play. And I said, sure, love to. So as we were driving, once again, we're just talking basketball. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm not doing anything. He said, well, why don't you come and work with me? So I said, fine. So I went to Dowling for a year and got a new AD. They let go of the staff. I ended up going to Riverhead. And in the meanwhile, Michael Mosby, who went to Adelphi, I met Coach Cosgrove through Michael. And
All-American, honorable mention,
yes.
Sachem grad, probably arguably the best player you had when you were the head coach at Sachem. And I had called all of the games that he played in. So I'm very vividly intimate with his style. Very good kid. Yeah.
Well, and he was perfect for Cos, because that's Cos. I mean, just go get it and don't step back or anything else like that. So, so Michael went and played there, and unbeknownst to me, Cos was his number one guy was leaving, and I went to the Final Four, and Cos came up to me and he said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." He says, "No, I want to talk to you when you get back. So give me a call. So when I got back, I gave him a call. I went into Adelphi and he said, you want to coach? And I said, sure, I want to coach, He goes, well, how much money do you want? I said, I don't know. What are you paying? He goes, well, how much are you making in high school? So I told him, and he goes, okay, I'll pay you that much money. So I got paid like $7,500 to be his assistant. And so we went together. He was great to work for because he taught me how to be a college coach. Being a college coach is different than being a high school coach in the fact that, high school, the kids go home to their parents. In college, they stay there. They're your responsibility, So he taught me a lot about that. He also taught me a lot about coaching in college and coaching the college game. And after the third year, he decided that he wanted to go home. He had some issues, some family things that he had to tie up and take care of. So he came in and he told us that he was leaving. And we were all in shock. And then I went upstairs and I talked to the AD, Mr. Hartwell, and said I was interested in the job. And believe it or not, the kids actually went up. They were the biggest influence in me getting this position. And they gave me the head coaching job. And yeah, that's high school is one level, and then college obviously is another level. But fortunately for me, my life didn't depend upon it. Me being winning was not the paramount thing. As a matter of fact, I had probably he has to be in the top 3 of all-time players ever coached, was a kid named Richie Bird out of Kopek. He's still the all-time leading scorer in Adelphi history. And he was just tremendous. And the first 2 years I took over, we won the league. We went to the NCAAs. And I remember them asking me, did I feel any pressure? I said, no, I don't feel any pressure at all. My life is not going to change. Yeah, I said, I won't be able to go out to dinner 3 times. I can only go out once. But yeah, so that aspect was great. And the recruiting was, I enjoyed the recruiting when I got to the game. I did not enjoy the commuting. If you would leave practice, you'd go to Jersey. It would be a 5-hour trip, 2.5 hours there and 2.5 hours back. And you were just going to northern Jersey with all the traffic. So, but it was part of it. And I really enjoyed it. I made a lot of friends. I met a lot of people, and then, I finished up my career at Stony Brook with Steve Peichel. And, those last 2 years, again, it was another type of philosophy that I saw. He's demanding, but he's not, he laughs a lot. They laugh a lot. They get everything accomplished. He's really a bright guy, and, his success is not unexpected. I can tell you that much. So I don't know if I answered that question well enough for you.
But... I always like to, everything's kind of chronological, and, ending on the college note, obviously is important to hear your journey and assessment of that experience. I guess the final minute, kind of sum up your Sachem experience and what it meant for you to have such an impact.
The biggest thing was I enjoyed the kids. I don't know how else to say it. Like I said, I don't know who I saw the other day at the Hall of Fame. I call him a kid. I said, you'll always be a kid. I said, I know you're a man. And I said, I'll tell you a true story. I talked to Tommy Evans a couple of months ago, and Tommy told me he was 64. I almost fell off the chair. 64. Oh my God, I'm old. But no, I really enjoyed the kids. All of them. Now, they bring a certain aura and they bring a certain energy level. And every day you would get energy from them. And they just wanted to work hard, and they wanted to be good, and they were willing to do what you asked them to do. And, I never had that many problems ever. So I enjoyed every day. And, I was lucky. I mean, who would have thought that I would have ended up at Sachem? I mean, at one point, Chris, there wasn't anybody not jealous of Sachem from every aspect, athletically, academically. In that heyday, I mean, it was incredible, and to be able to walk around and see kids and talk to kids and realize that in some aspects you will have somewhat of an influence on these kids. As somebody said to me the other day, I don't know if I'm deserving this. I said, no, you are, because you're the reason that most of these kids are where they are right now because of your influence through coaching. And I think, to me, it's still the most powerful word. So, yeah.
Well, that sums it up, coaching, and it's all about the kids. So, listen, I appreciate this is the longest interview I've done so far in this series.
I can ramble on.
Yeah, but it's all good because it's some fun stories, and I like, again, this is all part of documenting it. So,
yeah,
I appreciate the time. I appreciate the impact, your passion for the district, and everything that this community has experienced because of you as a coach, because of you as a teacher. So, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for keeping this legacy going on about this district, because it is important. It really is important, and it is an important school district. And what you're doing means a lot. I mean, just the alumnus themselves feeling that they still matter. I think that's the biggest thing, that they still matter, and that there's a place for them to go home. Yeah.